qualitative research. Then from there, you start to write your research design. So our next topic is what to write, what to write in your research design. So these are the elements of research design. So of course, first of all, in your chapter 3, when you write your research design, first of all, you have to tell the readers, you have to write, you are conducting a quantitative research or you are conducting a qualitative research. That one is the first thing, first and foremost. After that, then only you continue with all these things. So after you have decided, okay, the types of your research, quantitative or qualitative, then you continue to write on all this. Extent of researcher interference, your study setting, unit of analysis, time horizon, population and sampling, research instrument, data collection plan, and data analysis plan. Okay, so anybody want to ask any questions? Any questions?
At this stage, there's no question, but I have one question, Doctor, in the chat box. Yeah, this is from Ahmad Rosli bin Said. This is regarding the one that you have discussed earlier. Rosli is a technical student from electrical, asking for your advice regarding the methodology. Methodology for his area. Basically, he's a technical student. Ahmad Rosli, are you here? Do you want to talk directly to Doctor, maybe?
Yes, Ahmad, can you please explain a little bit about your questions? I need some input from you regarding your question because you're asking about research methodology. So I'm not so sure of what kind of research methodology that you are actually looking for.
Ahmad Rosli, are you there? You can just unmute. I think Dr. Ahmad Rosli is not ready, maybe.
Okay, never mind. Maybe after the session lah.
Yes,
after
yes.
The session.
We'll get back to you, Ahmad Rosli. Yeah.
Okay, sure, no problem. Okay, I'm waiting for questions. Looking at this slide, any questions? Looking at this slide, any questions from you?
Yeah, Hanafi asking about time horizon.
Okay, I will answer that question later. I'm waiting for a question. Okay, time horizon, I will explain that later. Yes?
Sorry to disturb. For quantitative, how do we actually write the extent of researcher interference?
Okay, I will answer that later. That later.
Thank you.
Okay, I'm still waiting for the question that I want. Okay, the question that I want.
Okay, try your luck, guys. Okay.
Doctor, I always cannot differentiate between research design and research method.
Design is the plan. Design is the overall plan. Method is more specific. Do you get me? It's like building a house. Building a house, you need to draw the plan. You draw the plan first. After you have drawn the plan, then you have to be specific. Okay. For example, you need a door. Okay, you need a door. So what kind of door that you want? So design is the overall plan, but the method is specific one. Okay. Have I answered the question?
Okay, Doctor, thank you.
Okay, so I'm still waiting for a question that I want or a question that I'm looking for. Looking at this slide, I'm looking for a question. Any one of you, can you just ask a question? Looking at this slide, can you just ask me a question? I'm looking for a question that I want. No.
No question so
no
far.
Question.
Is it regarding to topic?
Try your luck and ask the question.
Doctor, the one that...
Sorry.
Haiza. Okay.
Why you have that kind of star, like for example, like population and something.
I think you got it right, Haiza.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Haiza. Okay.
Yes. Okay, thank you.
If we are in a classroom, if we're having a face-to-face session, I will give you a gift. Okay, that is the question that I'm looking for. Why am I having stars? Okay, why there are 2 stars here for population sampling and research instrument? Okay, so for today's session, I will not focus too much on population and sampling and also research instrument. I will still discuss with you regarding these 2 topics. I will discuss with you. Okay, but in details, I was told by Encik Taufik we have another 2 sessions specifically on population and sampling and also research instrument. Okay, so today's session I will just go through. But if you have any question, you can still ask me regarding population and sampling and also research instrument. But I will not go into details because population and sampling alone, it takes another 2 hours. Research instrument, it may take another 2 hours. So we do not have that much of time to discuss these 2 topics thoroughly. So that's why I put a star here. I put a star here to just to let you know you have another 2 sessions specifically on population sampling and also research instrument. So please attend that 2 sessions because they are really important. Okay. So go back to our first question just now and the second questions, okay, regarding time horizon, regarding extent of research interference. So I will discuss that with you later on. But if we look at these slides, this slide actually summarizes to you what should you write in your research design. These are the things, these are all the things that you should have in your chapter 3 later on. That means that when you write your research design, you make sure that you write down all these things. So how to present them? Normally, I will tell my students, you can present all these things separately according to subtitle. That means that don't write them in a paragraph. Break them down into separate sections or break them down into different subtopics or subheadings so that examiners or the panels they can get your ideas easily and they can get your ideas clearly. Okay, so I will go through with you all these topics one by one, all these elements one by one. Okay, so let us look at the first 2, extent of research interference and study setting. So if you are conducting a quantitative research, for example, your research is about collecting data through questionnaire and so on, okay? So you are using quantitative methods. So normally your extent of researcher interference would be very minimal. Experiment, just now we have discussed about experiment. If you are conducting an experiment requires a greater extent of interference from the researcher. Because if you are in an experiment, you are the researcher, you have to control the environment. You have to, what we call, set up. You have to set up the experiment environment and so on. So the extent of interference from researcher is higher or greater in an experiment. But if let's say you are just conducting a descriptive studies or even causal studies where you just use questionnaire, you distribute the questionnaire and then people fill up the questionnaire and then you collect back the questionnaire, that means that that type of research, the extent of interference is very low. Okay, so that is the first one. The second one is study setting. So why I put these 2 topics together, because they are interrelated. Okay, they are supporting each other lah. So normally, if the extent of researcher interference is low, that means that not much interference from the researcher. Normally, the study setting will be non-contrived. Non-contrived means you don't control the environment. But if let's say you are conducting an experiment, or let's say you are conducting a focus group discussion, interviews, and so on, then your interference might be greater. That means the level of interference might be higher. So if the extent of interference is greater, that means that the study setting would be a contrived setting. So they are interrelated to each other. So you have to make sure that what you write in your extent of researcher interference is relevant to your study setting. This is very important. Okay. Then the next, we have this unit of analysis and time horizon. Okay. Unit of analysis. A lot of students, they have problems in identifying their unit of analysis. So what does it mean by unit of analysis? If you look at the explanation here, it refers to the level of aggregation of the data collected. So when you explain your unit of analysis, you have to think about from whom that you are going to collect your data. Okay, from whom that you are going to collect your data. So normally in our research, we will either collect the data from individuals or from the organizations. I give you one example. Okay, I give you one example. My students. Okay, one of my master students, his research is about entrepreneurial intention because my area is in entrepreneurship. So this student, his research is about entrepreneurial intention. So in his research, he actually want to find out. Okay, he actually want to find out what are the factors? What are the factors that cause students to become entrepreneurs? So he wants to find out what are the factors that cause or influence students to become entrepreneurs. So in his case, his unit of analysis is individuals. Why? Because he collects the data from individual students. Okay, he collects his data from individual students. That means that he distributes his questionnaire to individual students. So students answer the questionnaire individually. He collects the data from the students individually. So in his case, his unit of analysis is individual. I have another student. Her research is about organizational performance. Okay, her research is about organizational performance. She would like to see the performance of SMEs, small and medium enterprises. The performance of SMEs during COVID-19. So that's about her research lah. So in her case, in the second example, SMEs performance. In the second example, the students collects the data from organizations. But you have to bear in mind, organizations will not answer your questions because organization is a non-living things. Business, enterprise, companies, they are non-living things. They cannot answer your question. So you need to identify in organization who should be the one to answer your question. So for my second student, SME performance, her unit of analysis is organization, but who answer, who is the one? Who is the one that answer the questionnaire? Who is the one that provide the data? The person that provide the data or the person that answer the questionnaire is the person in charge of the organization or the manager of the organization. So we can see from here, unit of analysis, it refers to the person or the what we call from whom that you collect the data from. It can be from individuals, it can be from organizations. From individuals, normally no problem lah. Individuals mean the person will answer the question. But if let's say your unit of analysis is organizations, you have to write it down clearly in the organization who is the person that would give you the information? It's either the manager or the person in charge. That is the organization. So normally for our research would only involve either individuals or organizations. But some other people's research might involve country. Okay, I've seen one of my colleagues' research. His research is about the what we call this country's performance, GDP performance, and so on. So he actually collects the information. He actually collects the data from the country. So he is using secondary data lah. He's using secondary data. So he collects the data from the country. So he's actually analyzing the country. So in his case, because he's studying about GDP of the country, performance of the country, and so on. So in his case, the unit of analysis is country. But for our case, for our research, normally it will be either individuals or organizations. So I think this is very important. You have to make it very clear when you write your research design. You have to write it down clearly. Individuals, I think okay lah, no problem. But a lot of students, if their unit of analysis is organizations, sometimes they make mistakes. Okay, organization, and then you ask the students, since you are going to collect the data from organization, can you tell me who will be the one that provide the data to you? Sometimes they cannot answer. Okay, so you have to make sure that if you collect the data from organization, if your unit of analysis is organization, you can ask the person in charge or the manager to provide the information to you. That means that the manager or the person in charge will represent the organization. And the next one, we have time horizon. So just now, someone asked the questions about time horizon. So time horizon actually very simple. Okay, don't make things complicated. It's about the time that you spend to collect the data. There are two types. It's either cross-sectional or longitudinal. So what is cross-sectional? Cross-sectional means you only collect the data for once. You only collect the data for one time. What does it mean by collect the data for one time? For example, if you are using questionnaire, let's say you use questionnaire, so you distribute the questionnaire only for one time. You distribute the questionnaire to your respondents, and then you may give 7 days to your respondents to answer. Okay, after 7 days, you collect back your questionnaire. So you actually collect the data for one time only, because there is only one set of questionnaire. You distribute your questionnaire for one time, for only once, even though you give the respondent 7 days, but you collect it for once. So that is cross-sectional. So some students ask, sir, I give my questionnaire to my respondents today. After 7 days, my respondents say the questionnaire disappeared already. He misplaced the questionnaire. So after 7 days, I give him another new questionnaire. Is that still cross-sectional? The answer is yes, it is still cross-sectional, because you collect the data for only one time. This cross-sectional, it does not involve the time where you give reminder lah. Maybe you give 2-3 times reminder. Okay, maybe you give up to 1 month for your respondents to fill up the questionnaire. 7 days to fill up the questionnaire, 30 days to fill up the questionnaire, 3 reminders, 2 reminders. Those are not counted. Cross-sectional means how many times? If you only collect the data for one time, that means cross-sectional. What is longitudinal? Longitudinal, normally it involves a long period. That means that you collect the data for 2-3 times. What does it mean by you collect the data for 2-3 times? Okay, so I give you an example lah. Okay, I give you an example. I have read a research before this. I have read a research before this. This research, it took about 15 years to complete. 15 years. It took about 15 years. 15. Okay, it took about 15 years to complete. So during these 15 years, the researchers collected the data from the same respondents for many times. So that research was about children development. So the researcher actually collect the data from the same group of children, when the children, they are 1 year old, when they are 5 years old, when they are 10 years old, when they are 15 years old. So we can see over this period of time, 15 years, the researcher collected the data 4 times, 1 year old, 5 years old, 10 years old, 15 years old. So 4 times spread along these 15 years. So that is a type of longitudinal research. So for masters and for PhD research, I don't think you have longitudinal research unless you don't want to graduate . Okay, we are talking about graduate on time. You need to graduate in 3 years time. So 3 years time, normally longitudinal is not logic . It's not logic. So normally it will be cross-sectional. So for masters, for PhD level, cross-sectional is good enough. Okay, so I remember my supervisor, when I did my PhD, my supervisor, he got a grant from our Ministry of Higher Education, LRGS, Longitudinal Research Grant Scheme. Okay, he got about 1 million ringgit for that particular research. So it's a long time or long period research where the research was spread. The research was spread along, I think, 6 to 7 years. Okay, so I hope I answered the questions about time horizon just now. Okay, who asked that question just now?
Yeah, I think you did answer. It's from Hanafi.
Hanafi, have I answered the question?
Not sure where Hanafi is.
Okay, never mind. So I hope I answer Hanafi's question regarding this time horizon. Okay, so let us move on to the 2 most popular part in research design. Okay, so population and sampling and also research instrument. So I remember one of my master students, okay, during his DRP, he got a lot of questions regarding these sampling techniques. But luckily he was able to answer . Okay, luckily he was able to answer. So I think it is good that Encik Taufik will break this population and sampling and research instrument into 2 different sessions because they are really very important. So as what I'm going to discuss with you today, I will just give you some basic ideas about population and sampling and also research instrument. So when you write your research design, you have to explain, you have to define your population and your sample thoroughly or clearly. So definition, okay, definition of population is given here, as you can see from here. Okay, population refers to entire group of people or events or things of interest that the researchers wishes to investigate. So as what I have said just now, let's use my students' research as an example. Okay, let's use my students' research as an example. So I said just now, one of my students, his research is about students' intention to be entrepreneur. So his population is actually students in UiTM. Okay, students in UiTM. But you cannot just write down in your research design, my population is student in UiTM, because that is too vague. When you write your population, you have to define your population. You have to tell your people, you have to tell the readers, you have to tell people who is your population. For example, for my students, he has defined the population very well. He defined it very clearly. He said that his population refers to all the full-time students, undergraduate students, part 5, and Part 6 students. That means final year students. From Puncak Alam and Shah Alam. So that is the way how you define your population. You cannot just give a vague idea to the examiner or a vague idea to the panel or a vague idea to the reader. Oh, my population is students from UiTM. There are so many students in UiTM, you know. Some of them are part-time students. Some of them are full-time students. And then students, we can have postgraduate students, undergraduate students. Who are they actually? Students in UiTM. Total, we have about 300,000 students. Correct me if I'm wrong. If I'm not mistaken, we have about 300,000 students. Oh, so many of them. So you cannot just what we call simply tell people my population is students in UiTM. Cannot. You have to define it very well. Another example, my students who is doing SME performance, her population is SME. But do you know that we have hundreds of thousands of SME in Malaysia? So you cannot just say my population is SME. You have to define it well. Define it properly. Who are those SME? So for my students, she defined population is SME. Okay, SME from the service sector. And then registered in MITI. SME, service sector, registered in MITI, okay, doing tourism business. So you can see, now you can imagine, oh, the population is that group of people. It is very specific. So that is population. After that, you have to define your sample. Okay, you have to define a sample. Sample normally is the subset of the population lah. Sample is the person or is the one that will give you the data, or sample is the one that will give you the information that you want for your research. So how to select the sample? In your research design, you have to write down your sampling techniques. Generally, the sampling techniques, we can divide it into probability and non-probability. Okay, and of course, probability sampling, you can still break it down to various methods. Probability sampling, for example, we can have simple random sampling, stratified sampling, systematic sampling, and so on. That is under probability sampling. Non-probability sampling, we can have convenience sampling, we can have purposive sampling or judgment sampling. Some people use snowball sampling, so all those are non-probability sampling. So I think the next session on population and sampling, the speaker may tell you more about probability sampling and non-probability sampling and which technique to be used. But what I want to share with you today is whether you should use probability sampling or non-probability sampling. It depends on your population. Okay, it depends on your population. If you are able to get the population frame, okay, if you are able to get the population frame, you should use probability sampling. But if let's say you cannot get a population frame, then you should use non-probability sampling. This is very important, okay, because if you have selected the wrong sampling techniques, that means that you might have errors in your data later. Your data might not be accurate if you have what we call mistakes. If you have made a mistakes in selecting your sampling technique. So what does it mean by population frame? I'll give you one example. Like just now, my students. Okay, the first students, his research is about students' intention to be entrepreneurs. And then he said that his population is students from UiTM, undergraduate students, final year students, and so on. So in that case, my student, he actually can get the population frame. He can get the name list of the students. Okay, he can get the name list of the students. And he actually did that. My students, he went to HEA. He went to HEA and then he told the officer in HEA he would like to conduct research and so on, and then that officer helped him to get the students' name list. So if you're able to get the list, okay, if you're able to get the list of the elements in your population, you have the population frame, you should use probability. But if let's say in your research, you are not able to get the population frame, then you should go for non-probability sampling. So what are the research that you are not able to get the population frame? For example, let's say your research is about smokers. We don't have a name list. Who are smokers, who are non-smokers? We don't have the name list. So we don't have the name list, then we cannot use probability sampling. We have to use non-probability sampling. Okay, so this is important, okay, to avoid what we call inaccurate data to be collected in future. So population and sampling, please pay attention when you write your research design. So besides population and sampling, another things that you have to pay attention to is your research instrument. So I only focus on questionnaire here because I think most of you are using questionnaire. But if you're using questionnaire, you have to explain whether you are using self-administered questionnaire or non-self-administered questionnaire. What does it mean by self-administered questionnaire? For example, you have the questionnaire and then you just distribute the questionnaire to the respondents and then the respondents fill up the questionnaire by themselves. That is self-administered. They read the questionnaire by themselves, they understand, they try to understand the questions by themselves and then they fill up the questionnaire by themselves. That one is self-administered. So I think from time to time, maybe you receive Google Forms, you receive requests to fill up questionnaire and then you read the question by yourself. If you don't understand the question, you try to understand it by yourself or you try to interpret it by yourself and then you try to answer it by yourself. So that is self-administered. But sometimes you may need to use non-self-administered questionnaire. If let's say your respondents, have problems in filling up the questionnaire. For example, let's say your respondents, they are OKU, deaf, blind, cannot see, cannot hear, dumb. Dumb, I think still okay lah, but deaf, let's say. Your respondents, they're OKU, maybe they are blind, deaf, or whatever. So maybe you need to help them in filling up the questionnaire. Or maybe they are not well educated. For example, just now I told you that we have performed a research for pharma. So we actually use questionnaire, but we need to help the respondents to fill in the questionnaire because most of them, they are old people, senior citizens, and they have problem in understanding the questionnaire. So we may need to explain to them, we may need to help them to fill out the questionnaire. So if that is the case, you are using a non-self-administered questionnaire. So this thing you also need to explain in your research design, what kind of questionnaire that you are using. But of course, logic must prevail lah. Logic must prevail. That means that if let's say you say that your population, they are all managers. Let's say your population are managers, your respondents are managers in SMEs and so on. And then in your research instrument, you say that your questionnaire is non-self-administered questionnaire, then it may not make sense. It may not be logic. In managers, they can read what, they can write what, they can answer the question what. Why must it be a non-self-administered questionnaire? So when you write your research design, okay, you have to make sure that logic prevails. So when you develop your research instrument, you have to pay attention to operationalization of concepts. In your chapter 1, I think you have one section about operationalization of your variables, or maybe you have these operational definitions for your variables. Okay, I think in your chapter 1 lah. I'm not so sure in your faculty, operational definitions, you write it in which chapter, but in my faculty, students, they are required to write the operational definition in chapter 1. So you write all the definitions of variables in chapter 1. You have to make sure that what you define in chapter 1, it is reflected in your questionnaire. Okay, for example, you define satisfaction. Let's say you define satisfaction as how happy people are, okay, the feeling of people and so on. So that is how you define satisfaction in chapter 1. So in your research instrument, the questions that you ask about satisfaction has to be something related to happy, has to be something related to good feeling and so on. So make sure that they are tally. Examiner will do that. They will check your questions in your questionnaire, and then they will refer back to your operational definitions. Okay, are they tally? So avoid you define it as one thing, and then in questionnaire you ask another thing. You have to avoid that. Okay, and then in research instrument, you have to make sure that the items that you develop, items means questions. The questions that you ask, okay, you adapt the questions from previous research. Don't create your own questionnaire. Okay, undergraduate students okay, normally undergraduate students will ask this question. So why we cannot create the questionnaire? Because creating a questionnaire, it needs validation, it needs what we call reliability study and so on. So normally we don't have that time, we don't have that much of time to develop the questions. So that's why we will adapt the questions from the previous study. So in your questionnaire, you have to pay attention to the scale that you use, nominal, ordinal, interval, or ratio. So I think most of us, we will be using nominal scale and interval scale. Nominal scale, for example, you ask questions like your gender. Okay, you ask respondents' gender, whether you are male or you are female. You ask about respondents, maybe their race, okay, Malay, Chinese, or Indian. So that's nominal. Normally in our questionnaire, we will use nominal scale and also interval scale. Interval scale, for example, you are using Likert scale. Okay, Likert scale. So when you develop your research instrument, which is questionnaire, you have to make sure that you fulfill the requirement for reliability and validity. So you have to analyze. You have to analyze statistically for your reliability and validity. Okay, so that's some basic ideas about population and sampling and also research instrument. So the last one is about this data collection plan and data analysis plan. So my students, some of them, they don't know how to write for this data collection, what to write. So in this data collection plan, you need to write down, for example, how are you going to collect the data? Are you going to distribute the questionnaire manually, or are you going to distribute the questionnaire electronically? You have to write it down. And then how much time is given to the respondents? 1 week? 3 days? Are you going to give them reminders? So all these things, you have to write it down in your data collection plan. And you may also write down the strategies that you are going to use to increase the response rate. Because sometimes you give questionnaire to the respondents may not want to answer. So you need to think about strategies, how to make sure that they answer your questionnaire. So you may want to provide token of appreciation, okay? You may want to give reminders and so on. Or you may want to force them, okay? So I don't know . So that's your data collection plan. You have to write it down in your research design. How are you going to collect the data? And then the last part in your research design should be data analysis plan. So in data analysis plan, you don't have to write, you don't have to show your analysis. Don't have to show your analysis because this is the plan. That means that in this section, you write down what types of analysis that you are going to perform. And again, it is analysis, not what type of software that you are going to use. Normally, examiner or panel, they will not pay too much attention on what software that you are going to use. but they will pay attention to what type of analysis that you are going to perform. So the three most commonly used analysis is regressions. But nowadays, I can see that students, they are getting fewer lah. Okay, less and less students are using regressions because if you read the latest research, actually there are a lot of criticisms, there are a lot of comments on regressions, OLS regressions. So nowadays, students, they prefer to go for PLS, partial least square structural equation modeling, or covariance-based structural equation modeling. But I can see that in UiTM, most students, they prefer to go for PLS. I remember I attended a DRP that day. That student in the research design, she explained that she wants to use PLS lah. Okay, the analysis that she would like to use is PLS. So I asked the student, why do you want to use PLS? The student replied, oh, because this is the trend now. Now a lot of people, they use PLS. That is not the answers. Which analysis that you should use, it depends. Okay, it depends on the data that you collect. So for example, okay, if your data, your sample size is very small. Let's say your sample size is only 100 over or maybe less than 100. Covariance-based SEM is not suitable because covariance-based SEM, it is suitable for research where the sample size is large, 300 and above. Then maybe you can use CB SEM. But if let's say your size is small, the sample size is small, then you should use PLS. And then it also depends on normality, linearity, and so on. If let's say your data is not normal, you cannot achieve normality for your data, then you cannot use CB. You have to use PLS. So in answering which types of analysis that you should perform, it depends on the data that you collect. It is not whether this analysis is the current trend or it is not the current trend. No, it depends on the data that you collect. Okay, so these are the basic elements or the important elements that you should have in your research design. Okay, so I think nowadays some people are talking about mixed method research. So I hope not many of you are actually using mixed methods research lah. Okay, but there is a growing trend. There is a what we call growing numbers of mixed methods research nowadays. So what is mixed method research? Mixed method research, you mix both. Just now I explained to you, okay, I told you that there are two main types of research. We have quantitative, we have qualitative. So mixed method is the combination of these two. That means that you combine two of them. Okay, so why do we use mixed method research? Again, if let's say you are using mixed methods, if you are using mixed methods in your research, don't tell the examiner, because nowadays mixed method is the most popular methods, because nowadays a lot of people are using mixed methods. Don't tell the examiners that. You have to tell the examiners the reasons why you choose mixed methods. For example, maybe your research questions could be answered by both methods. For example, your research questions consist of, you want to know what is the level or what is the extent of certain things. For example, you may want to know what is the extent of customer satisfaction. If you want to know what is the extent, you want to know the level, definitely that requires quantitative analysis. But maybe you have another research question. Okay, another research question is, why customer feel satisfied? You want to know why. When you want to know why, you may need to conduct interviews. You may need to get some inputs through interviews to answer the questions why customer feels satisfied. So if you have those type of research questions, your research question has to be answered by both methods. Okay, and then maybe you think that by combining both methods, it can provide better understanding for your research. And this is important, corroborate results. Normally, researchers perform mixed method research because they want to corroborate the results. Corroborate the results here means that we want to confirm our results. For example, maybe through quantitative research, when you use questionnaire, you find out that, okay, oh, customers, when they visit, let's say customers in a restaurant, let's say, customer in a restaurant, you find out that customers in a restaurant, they will feel satisfied if the food is nice or if the food is delicious. From questionnaire, maybe you find out that, oh, customers, they feel satisfied when the food is nice or when the food is delicious. But that is what you find out from the questionnaire. But maybe you want to reconfirm back. Is that true? Is what I get from my questionnaire true? Is that really accurate? You may want to corroborate the result. You may want to reconfirm back the result. So you may want to conduct an interview. So you select a few customers, you interview them, and you see whether they give you the same answers or not. So that is corroborate the result. And other reasons for conducting mixed method research is because you want to enter a new phase of a study. Okay, currently I'm in a project. A research project with researchers from other universities. So we are trying to develop a set of what we call this a set of questionnaire. Okay, we are trying to develop a set of questionnaire. So our first phase is through interview. So we interview the entrepreneurs. We get input from entrepreneurs regarding their environmental management, how they manage environmental issues and so on. So we interview the entrepreneurs. After we have interviewed the entrepreneurs, okay, we come up with a set of questions. So interview is qualitative. So after we've got a set of questions, our second phase is we need to validate the question. We need to test the question. So to test the questions, to validate the questions, we need to conduct quantitative research. So we conduct qualitative research first. After we have got the questions, we validate it through quantitative methods. So that is a mixed method. That is an example where we enter a new phase of a study. So if you are using mixed methods research, I hope that you are doing or you are conducting your mixed methods research because of all these reasons. Okay, because of all these reasons, not because it is the latest development, not because, oh, I don't know, my supervisor said use mixed methods, so I use mixed method. No. Okay, when you use mixed methods, these are the reasons for you to use mixed method. I'm not good in conducting mixed methods research. I'm still learning it because I'm still doing a mixed method research now. I'm still learning from my counterparts, from my partners from another universities. So this is what I know about mixed methods research, and I think it's good for me to share with you regarding mixed methods now. Okay? Okay, so this is a